So now we move on to Dr. Jagriti Upadhyaya, a highly uh, learned scholar and a very active participant in the conference. She was almost for every paper, every point that is raised. She has her own references, she has her own points, she has her own observations, and such a scholarly woman and highly rigorous scholar. And during the interactions before the papers were being finalized, I understood that she comes from a learned family also. Even her mother was actually supposed to be one of the paper presenters for the conference. Her parents, her family, her relatives. Oh, there is a lot of academic culture in the family. So probably that's what makes her actually completely involved in every paper, every topic of the conference from her own perspective. Uh, we are very lucky to have you, ma'am,
Thank
as
you,
one of
sir.
the paper presenters. So she is now going to talk about dimensions of spiritual ecology and ecofeminism in the Bhumi Sukta, one of the Veda mantras.
Um, Good afternoon, all of you. At the outset, I would like to convey my sincere thanks to Dr. Nagaraj Paturi and V. Srinivasanji and the other organizers for having given me this opportunity to speak. And I dedicate this paper to my very learned mother, who is still, working at the age of 87. And one of her books on environment and Rigved is coming, in the next 2 months. So she is the one who inspires me, because my subject happens to be English literature, and I work on eco-criticism and ecofeminism as well. So she has been, like the one who inspired me to read and the Atharva Veda and portions of the Rig Veda, so that I could go back to my scriptures. Yes, and my grandfather, my mother's father, wrote a lot of Sanskrit text on which PhD is being done throughout India. He was given the Magh Award, the Kalidas Award, the Sanskrit Academy Award. So I'm thankful to him, because it's the genes that he passed to us. Now, my paper is basically reading the dimensions of spiritual ecology and ecofeminism in the Bhumi Suktam. So I have taken a sort of a dialectical approach, in the sense that when I come to Bhumi Suktam, as the earlier speaker was presenting, Sujata ma'am, as to what constitutes the Baconian, Newtonian, Cartesian universe, in the Judeo-Christian Enlightenment, and how it is responsible for the domination of Mother Earth. So how we look upon the Bhumi, the Mother Earth, in divine form, that is going to be the first part of my paper. And the second part of my paper would be like the opposite, and how ecofeminists are raising their voices to save Mother Earth. So I'll quote from Ellen Gunn, from Caroline Merchant's Key Concepts in Theory, Ecology. The Woman I Love is a Planet, that is the essay. The planet, our mother, grandmother Earth, is physical, and therefore, she says, a spiritual, mental, and emotional being. Planets are alive, as are all their byproducts or expressions, like what was said by Dr. Prasanna in the morning, such as animals, vegetables, minerals, and climatic and meteorological phenomena as well, which is very much there in the Bhumi Suktam as well. And this interrelatedness of nature and spirituality, it can be found throughout history and cross-culturally, particularly when we talk about pagan religions and animistic religions. Creation stories and rituals provide insight to the relationships observed by communities. Celebrations surrounding the changing of seasons, as in the summer or winter solstice, or the spring and fall equinox, we all have, witnessed the celebrations somewhere in the papers that were presented in the morning, whether it was Nagu Panchami or whether it was Mangala Gauri Pujan, etc. So these are like how seasons change, and we have, interestingly, a very famous celebration in the name of the Sitala Mata here, the one who saves you from chickenpox and smallpox. And we have a temple here in Jodhpur dedicated to the Sitala. And it is during Holi that, the celebrations, events go on for a week. And that is in conjunction with the change of the season. And it also has medical and Ayurvedic reasons, because this is the season when chickenpox and smallpox, they break out. So we have these celebrations, the religious celebrations surrounding the changes of season. And the calendar, regardless of place or conception, not only holds the space for linear observation of time, but also the cyclical rhythm of the moon and the seasonal changes. And we know that even our Jyotish, our astrology works on the basis of the cycle of the moon, and not the transit of the sun as it does in the Western world. So many cultures cultivate a reciprocal relationship with nature. And we have the Okanagan tribe of British Columbia, which says our flesh, blood, and bones are earth body in cycles in which the earth moves, and so does our body. Emotion or feeling is the capacity whereby community and land intersect in our beings and become part of us. This bond or link is a priority for our individual wholeness or well-being, I unquote. So this is how, pagan cultures and earth-centered traditions have long identified human beings, or what you call the symbiotic relationship between the human world and the non-human world throughout centuries. And then, of course, you have the Celtic communities who turn to the elements for guidance and wisdom. The Celtic great holidays are guided by the cycle of the moon and the sun. Then I'll quote from Carl Jung, Memories, Dreams, Reflections. At times I feel I'm spread out over the landscape and inside things, and am myself living in every tree, in the splashing of the waves, into the clouds and the animals that come and go in the processions of the seasons, I unquote. This is what we also call Yat Pinde Tat Brahmande. And what I have in me is in the Brahma, and the Brahman, the cosmos, and vice versa. And then, of course, I'll skip Lawrence Buell, but I'll talk about, Charlene Spretnek, who talks about the lost goddesses of early Greece, which is a collection of Hellenic myths. And she talks about the myth of Gaia, which states, free of birth or destruction, of time or space, or form or condition, is the void. From the eternal void, Gaia danced forth and rolled herself into a spinning ball, molded mountains along her spine, valleys in the hollow, and rhythms of hill and stretching plains followed her contours. She bore a flow of gentle rain that fed her surface and bore life. Now, when we come to the Bhumi Suktam, the 63 Sukta that is there in the 12th, what you call, Kand of the Atharva Veda, we find that the Bhumi is also, beneficent, benedictory, what you call, showering her bliss and benediction on, human beings. And Sukta 2 says the earth sustains and supports, medicinal plants and herbs, and she showers them on. She showers her benediction on us and fulfills. May she fulfill our wishes and bring us fame. It's like Nana Virya Aushadhiyam Vibhati Prithvi Naha Prathatam Radhyatam Naha. I'm not a great Sanskrit scholar, so you'll have to please bear with me. Then, of course, you have Suktam 17, 23, 61, and 63, which state that the earth has seas, oceans, rivers, lakes, ponds, etc., as resources, for human beings. Suktam 3 and 27 also talk about how these resources, particularly water, sustains us, and how they foster different grain, fruit, vegetable, where all creatures are happy. The creatures are the non-human world, as well as there is mention of farmers, sculptors, and people related to the industry. And it's like a collective prayer that we pray that our earth be a provider of all good things in life. This is Suktam 3. And then another mention is in Suktam 27. Then Suktam 42 and 44, Mother Earth sustain all creatures, nourishing them. She's loaded with mineral ores. She is called Hiranyavaksha, what you call golden breasted. And she also nurtures what you call the Pranagni, which is referred to as Vaishwanaram in the Atharva Veda in the Bhumi Suktam. So it's like, you have the concept of Gaia in paganist cultures, and you have the concept of, the Bhumi Suktam here, where the earth is in a role of a benefactress of humankind. So this concept of Gaia, of course, is used by James Lovelock to emphasize the biosphere as a self-regulating system. But for him, the earth was merely a cybernetic system. Not only that, but a unitary organism. So he uses terms like infant Gaia. Gaia was mortally stricken, Gaia herself. So this herself actually brings in the concept of the feminine in Gaia. And oh God, this, I'm sorry about the Sanskrit text not being visible here. So ancient Indian scriptures, they show that it has always been considered dharma or ethical duty of man to protect the environment, and it is highlighted as Manav Dharma. Nature for ancient India was not just a conglomerate of resources to be exploited indiscriminately, but a completely symbiotic and holistic system. So it's like, I'll just try to get the Sanskrit shlokas, but otherwise, like I just don't know what has happened, because the PDF that I sent had the Sanskrit, the font in Sanskrit. Anyways, so I'll just go through the translation, which is my translation. So it says, "O Mother Earth, thou who wearest the ocean as a mantle and the mountains as a breast, thou who art the consort of Lord Vishnu, I bow to you. Forgive me for treading my feet upon you. From the mountain breast of Mother Earth, the rivers full of life-sustaining milk nourish us." So ecologism now requires a new style of politics, because it starts not from a conception of humanity or human needs, but from a vision of a network of precious but fragile relationship between living species, including the human species. And Andrew Haywood, in his iconic book, Political Ideologies, he states, I quote, "Perhaps the most influential concept, for modern Greens has been developed by looking back to pre-Christian ideas, that is primitive religions. They often did not draw any distinction between human and other forms of living, and for that matter, little distinction between living and non-living objects. All things are alive, stones, rivers, mountains, and even earth itself, often conceived of as Mother Earth." And then, of course, the concept of Gaia as to the Greek goddess of the earth. I'll skip this slide. So in the Bhumi Suktam, of course, we find that Suktam 12 says, "Mata Bhumi Putro Prithivyaha." So the earth is my mother. And now this is what I have added from my side, that is, it's our duty to protect our mother as we take care of her in the old age. And then in the Bhishma Parv of the Mahabharata also, there is a shloka. I'm sorry that the Sanskrit version is not here. "Everything is born of and sustained by Mother Earth and ultimately becomes one with her. So she is the refuge and glory of all human beings." Then, of course, in the Atharva Veda, it says that we should not, harm what we call Mother Earth in any way. We should behave in such an ethical way that we don't harm her. And the great pantheistic poet William Wordsworth, he uses the line in Tintin Abbey, "Nature never did betray the heart that loved her." And eulogizing the romantic poets, Jonathan Bates is of the opinion that the romantic ecology reverences the green earth because it recognizes that neither physically nor psychologically can we live without green things. It proclaims that there is one life within us and abroad, that the earth is a single ecosystem that which we destabilize at our own peril, I unquote. The Atharva Veda also states that Mother Earth is a living organism with life, blood, and a soul, and inflicting pain on her would be a grave sin. And of course, we have Ishopanishad, Ishavasyam idam sarvam yat kinchat jagatyam jagat tena tyaktena bhunjitaha ma gridha kasya svidhanam. I know that the meaning is clear to all, that everything in this world and the other world belongs to Ishvara, and man should consume what is righteously his and not covet what belongs to others. Want to focus on the oxymoron that has been used here, that is tena tyaktena bhunjitaha. That is, when we talk about the consumeristic, rampant consumerism which is present in the capitalocene nowadays, the Anthropocene nowadays, is that we need to share more and consume less if we have to save Mother Earth. So what is righteously, what we call according to dharma, not mine, I cannot consume that. But what happens in the capitalistic society is that because I have power, I have hegemony, I take away the lion's share using my power and deprive all the others of their righteous share. And that is why, we have a skewed development and our resources are being depleted. We have the problems of climate change. We have the problems of ecological crises, which I'm using in plural, CRISES. We know the crisis that we are facing right now. So what doesn't belong to me according to dharma should not be mine. And that is why the role of aparigraha becomes very, very important. That is non-hoarding, non-covetousness, non-greed, So if we want to save Mother Earth. So I'm skipping, part of the Vedic literature. I've taken mantras from the Agni Puran. I've taken mantras from the Mahabharata and Rig Veda also. So they all caution about not inflicting any pain on Mother Earth. And then, because she nurtures her and keeps her close to her bosom like her own child, then the same sentiment for Earth Goddess is manifest in Indic texts. So the Bhumi Suktam, of course, Sukta 2 I've already discussed. We salute Mother Earth, who bestows upon human beings limitless freedom, and she bears many plants and herbs of different vitality for our well-being. May she shower her bounty and make us healthy. Then, of course, she is woven together with ocean and river waters, and in her is contained food, which she manifests when plowed. She gives us life. She may bestow us with that life. Then, of course, the Earth's biotic environment is a breathing entity, and it has its own animated spirits. And the rishis, they say idam va apo hridayam. That means the water has heart and it can also feel. It has sensory perceptions. So I'm skipping the Vaman Purana, in which the rishi eulogizes her as fragrant and beautiful with pure water, as well as glory. She's glorious with radiance. Her skies resonate with melodious sound. I bow to her in the morning, and she bless me with benevolence. This is all my translation. But a slightly different portrayal occurs, in Greek mythology, where Amitav Ghosh's recent book, the Nutmeg's Curse, Parables of a Planet in Crisis, he observes how Gaia is, as a benevolent mother in Indian mythology, wide-bosomed and bounteous and holy, often characterized by the epithet monstrous by Hesiod, and who was Homer's contemporary. And she is portrayed as a wily schemer who conceives of evil, cunning tricks to get rid of Uranus and Kronos, because she indulges in incest to have children. And then she takes help of these children to help Zeus become the most popular god on Mount Olympus. But Gaia also suffers because she becomes a battleground upon which men and gods act out their strife, leave her groaning and screaming, and as the forest burns and oceans boil, I unquote. Then, of course, man is considered an offspring of water. And I'll just skip some of these slides because we don't have much time. I have 67 slides here. So I'll come to ecofeminism in a couple of minutes. So how trees in mythology were supposed to be life givers. And in Kurma Puran, if you cut down a tree, it is tantamount to Brahma Hatya. Then we have Maharshi Bhrigu in the dialogue with Rishi Bharadwaj when he says, when a tree is felled, it sprouts life and it is aware of both pleasure and pain. Therefore, I see even trees as living beings, they are not inanimate. And then, of course, I'll come to the traditional American Indian philosophy of the sacred circle of life, which finds the spirit of fraternity and sorority in creation, where Stan Steiner says, I quote, life is shared with the bird, bear, insect, plants, mountains, clouds, stars, and the sun. Then, of course, Manusmriti also states that man should not put such its effluents as excretions, spittle, blood, or toxics in and contaminate the waters. It provides for stringent punishment to the person who defiles or contaminates waters. Cortelia's Arthashastra also maintains, the punishment that should be given, that if a citizen spoils or destroys a freshwater pond whose water is for human consumption and animal consumption, then the king should either execute him, and if he offers to rebuild the pond, the same way he should be levied with the punishment of 1,000 pun, and only then he should be spared. I unquote. Now, this is what we call the divinity in what you call the pagan worships, or what you call the Vedic Indian scenario. But now with that, we have juxtaposed with this is the Judeo-Christian ideology of God having created man in his own image, and man's domination over them through naming them. And no item in the physical creation, they say, has any purpose save to serve man's purpose. I'm quoting from Cheryl Glotfelty. And Sujata ma'am also used the term androcentric. She's very much right when it comes to ecofeminism. And we are so anthropocentric in our attitude that despite Copernicus, we find that the cosmos rotates around our little globe. And we are so hubristic that we have a skewed idea of development, and the result is the environmental crisis that we face today. And I'll quote Lynn White Jr. She states that man and nature are two distinct entities in Christianity. The victory of Christianity over paganism was the greatest psychic revolution in the history of our culture. And she finds the most anthropocentric religion in the world. It is in absolute contrast to ancient paganism and Asia's other religions, except perhaps Zoroastrianism. And it has established a dualistic, is a concept between man and nature. And that Christianity also insists that God's will is that man should use nature for his proper ends. So Christopher Maines also, he talks about, the Tuscarora Indians in Nature and Silence in the Eco-Critical Reader. And he says the language that we speak today, the idiom of the Renaissance and enlightened humanism, veils the processes of nature in its own cultural obsessions, directionalities, and motives that have no analogus in the world today, I unquote. So this is what enlightened humanism does to, the environment today. Then, of course, Caroline Merchant speaks about tribal societies pursuing their needs through the imitation of nature, and power over nature was for self-preservation, which was achieved through imitative magic. But enlightenment disenchants this process and nature by removing all this mystery from nature and turning it into an object. Then I'll leave this, how every tree and every spring had its own guardian spirit. So ecofeminism, as the earlier speaker said, it was a powerful response to the anthropocentric culture, nature dualism upheld by the 18th century enlightened humanism. And women have long been, included in the sphere of nature and emotions. See, there was a question raised by Aditi ji. See, I hope this would answer that, because women have long been included as feminine and part of the spheres of natures, and since they are emotional and have been assigned the role of earth mothers and passive childbearing beings. That is why they are connected to Mother Earth, because they nurture, they bear the womb. I'll come to that in my next slide also, how the earth is furrowed for, producing yield and harvest. The same way, the womb, the female is penetrated for creating the next generation. And then men have been always been associated with reason, civilization, and the public sphere. So the emotional connect, of the nature of women and mother nature establish what you call a relationship between or what you call the earth women continuum. Of course, Francois de Aubonne ma'am has already referred to. So it's a pluralistic movement, embraces a number of causes. Greta Gard defines it as a movement that calls for an end to all oppressions. And unless we liberate women, we'll not be able to liberate nature. Then ma'am has already spoken about Vandana Shiva ma'am. So Maria Mais and Vandana Shiva, they both happen to be eminent eco-feminists. So they conceptualize the master-slave relationship that operates in men's behavior towards the same being applied to women and nature. So in the capitalist, this is the second aspect of ecofeminism. The first is how women are connected because of the nurturing that they do, because of the womb that they have, because of the child that they bear. So the productive role is there between the women nature continuum. And the second is how in a capitalist patriarchal model, male tendency of treating nature as a commodity to be used and harnessed is extended to the treatment of women's bodies as a sexual commodity. So that is why, when you read frontier novels, the land is described as fruitful, virginal, with a fertile womb that is supposed to produce superabundant plenitude, to be furrowed and to be sowed with seed. This is where the connection between women and Mother Earth is there, that the land is to be furrowed and sowed with seed. And we also have the fertility cults of Egypt, where you have where you have the effigy of Osiris being filled with grains, and when the Nile overflows, the ritual of the fertility cult comes in, the grain sprouts. So this is how the fertile womb of women and Mother Nature are connected, and they are both supposed to provide superabundant plenitude. And look at the word furrowed and sowed with seed, because furrowed is actually equated to the penetration of the woman, and the sowing of the man's seed in her for the next generation. So you have a critical examination of the patriarchal juxtaposition of women and nature embedded in the religious, cultural, symbolic domain, about the violence perpetrated on women, which is often condoned by patriarchal religions through the male interpretation of scriptures and religious texts. And then I'll just come to a critical examination of the patriarchal juxtaposition of women with nature embedded in the religious, cultural, symbolic domain actually is wrongly interpreted by the males. Susan Griffin, writing in Women and Nature, says, The Roaring Insider, she says, her is another cornerstone work which stresses the interconnection. She says, I know I'm made from this earth, as my mother's hands were made from this earth, as her dreams came from this earth, and all that I know in this earth. Ursula Gunn in Women Wilderness, Healing the Wounds, is critical of the civilized man, and she is critical of the man who says, and this is how the Enlightenment establishes, the patriarchy establishes, where he says, I am self, I am master, all the rest other, outside, below, under, subservient. I owe, I use, I own, I use, I explore, I exploit, I control. What I do is what matters is for. I am that I am, and the rest is woman and the wilderness to be used as I see fit. So when you take the great chain of being and the Judeo-Christian biblical idea of man having domination of nature and splice it with patriarchy, how man tries to dominate female. So if you look at the line, rest is woman and the wilderness. So the wilderness here is what you call, not the wilderness in what you call your common sense, but wilderness here would be everything of the biosphere, everything of a particular region of the earth. And it has to be used as I see fit and not as society sees fit or as others see fit. So with God and his right-hand man at the center of the universe, conceived of as the hierarchical chain of being, There is no room for anyone or anything else in the driver's seat. I'm quoting Judith Plant from Karen J.
Jagriti
Warren.
ji, is this going to be your conclusion? The next slide.
Okay, sir. I'll just sir, how many minutes do you give me to conclude? Because I told you I.
Actually, you've been given a long time already.
Okay, so sir, I'll just come to the conclusion in a couple of minutes. And so ecofeminist historians, they show that how, Mother Earth image has been used by Western male writers since the Renaissance to underwrite the domination of Mother Nature and women. And the ancient mystification of nature as a benevolent female, Caroline Merchant argues in her key concepts in critical theory ecology, I quote, contained the implication that nature, when plowed and cultivated, could be used as a commodity and manipulated as a resource. With the scientific revolution, nature changed. So from an active teacher parent, which is very much there in the romantic poets, particularly Wordsworth, where he finds her as a healer, in the mad, sad music of humanity. So in the hands of the Baconian engineers, the modern world system, the whole thing subverts the concept of Mother Nature. And then, of course, she is mother, mistress, virgin, traditionally represented for men. And then Sherry B. Adorner, as the anthropologist, argues for the universality of equation. Man is to woman as nature is to culture, which was again a binary, which was disjunctive binary that was taken up by Sujata ji. So ecofeminism sees androcentrism or the domination of women as a model for other kinds of domination, especially of nature. Then, of course, the dualism ma'am has already spoken about, like human nature, mind, body, male, female, reason, civilization, etc. So today, the idea of the goddess flourishes, variously referred to in feminine theology as a figure in worship practices, ranging from witchcraft cults to spontaneous feminist support groups. So Sally McFadden advocates a remythologing of the relationship between God and the world by recourse to metaphors like the world as God's body and God as mother rather than father, because whenever we pray about our Father in heaven, hallowed be thy name. So Father in heaven is there. And if anything, if there is anything that can stop the human species from poisoning the earth or blowing it up, writes eco-theologian Carol Christ, is a deeply felt connection to all beings in the web of being. But and this was web of life. This was what was insisted upon by Dr. Prasanna in the morning. And then, of course, I'm skipping a certain slides because we call, like I've already spoken about, ancient texts replete with examples about everyone being part of the Brahma. So deep ecology by Anne Mace calls for a change in the consciousness, specifically the adoption of ecological consciousness to cosmological consciousness. Then, of course, Rachel Carson's Silent Spring, which pioneered the the pioneering book which spearheaded.
Ma'am, do you have an idea of how many more slides you have?
Yeah. So I'll just.
I think you can quickly run through the remaining slides and.
Yeah, it's like yes. So I'll quote Gandhi also.
Definitely, this is a highly scholarly and erudite presentation and paper. I would encourage all the audience to go to your paper when it is published. It is going to be published and it's going to be an enriching reading.
I'm sorry, I couldn't actually, read out the Sanskrit text because of this problem of putting
Definitely,
it in a
yeah.
word
So that's a font problem. Probably by creating your PowerPoint presentation, you did not tell the app what font to use at that time.
Yeah, normally like I use Word files. So if I had used a PDF file, then maybe I could have saved it. Anyway, so
yeah, so now please come to your conclusion portion, and
yes.
I request all the audience to go to your published paper. We are going to publish all these papers on our Indic Today magazine, and all these videos are going to be uploaded to our Indic Academy YouTube channel, so you can watch these videos. But I'm so sorry that we have a time constraint.
Yes, sir, I understand. So, see, the last slide would be like how, we need to revise the conventional moral thinking about the Western idea of religion to the Indian concept of dharma, that is righteous living, and reshape our understanding of happiness and well-being. Happiness doesn't lie in consumerism and rapacious materialism. So, and the cultural narcissism of the Judeo-Christian concept of man as conqueror of nature. Then, of course, ma'am has already referred to Aldo Leopold land ethic in the Sand County Almanac, and how deep ecologists view nature as the source of moral goodness. So nature has to have intrinsic or inherent value, and not as a value for its commodification for human beings. And Nace, I'll end up with Anna Nace, who says that the ecological field worker has a deep-seated respect or even veneration and forms of for ways and forms of nature. He reaches an understanding from within, a kind of understanding that others reserve for fellow men, and a narrow section for all section of that for all forms of life. So to an ecological field worker, the equal rights, should be given. They should blossom everywhere. It is intuitively clear. Its restrictions, would be detrimental upon the quality of humanity itself. I unquote. Then I'll just end up with, the Shanti Suktam, where it says, Yahu Shanti, Prithvi Shanti, Apah Shanti. Why does it that it wants everything in the cosmos to be at peace? See, everything without disturbance, everything in a state of equilibrium. And why do we end up with Om Shanti, Shanti, and Shanti? Because we all need that. Our mind and our being ontologically should be at peace, at in a state of equilibrium. So if there is conflict in water, if there is conflict in Mother Earth, obviously the retaliation comes in, the monstrosity of Gaia comes in. And then of course I have my references here. Thank you so much. I just ran through my presentation. So it's like I would end up with the Shanti Suktam, Dehu Shanti, Prithvi Shanti, Apa Shanti. So everything should be in a state of equilibrium and at peace, even Mother Earth.
Thank you very much, Jagriti ji. That was a scholarly paper. There was a comment in the Q&A box. Probably the participant was completely overwhelmed by too many Western references, and she or he was saying, any Indian reference in this context? So he was so except that it is about Bhumi Suktam. Most of the references were from foreign authors. Probably he or she was completely yeah, there is actually an appreciation of the paper, rendering the mythological action in nature, thanksgiving for the initiative, everything. It was all positive. And probably people were happy that Dr. Vandana Shiva, an Indian scholar, was being referred also. Yeah, okay, good. There is a lot of work that is being done all over the world. And probably Jagriti ji is trying to show that Indian references are from the primary sources like Bhumi Suktam and other Veda mantras.
Yeah, sir. Like Agni Puranam, I have taken Mahabharata.
These are all primary sources.
Yeah,
And
Manusmriti.
our Western references are all to show how they are in consonance with some of the contemporary eco-feminist thinking. That is why it gave an impression that it has too many Western references.
So my question, what I wanted to raise was that why are we so Eurocentric in our perspective? Why don't we go back to, what you call the study of our own scriptures for trying to understand ecofeminism as a movement? Because when we talk of feminism,
Jagriti ji, I understand, but probably to that participant, to that audience, it gave an impression that you were doing just the opposite of what you want us to do. So you are asking us not to be Eurocentric, but you are quoting too many Europeans. Uh, was probably the impression.
Sir,
But
when we look at the Bhumi Suktam, we don't find any monstrosity in the concept of the Bhumi Suktam. She is the benedictory, goddess. She
correct.
showers us with
I
benediction.
understand. I
But in
agree.
the Western, aspect, when we say the Bhumi is, to be furrowed, to be used as a commodity, to be used as a
Mhm.
resource. That is why in the
Absolutely.
beginning I told you that
Absolutely.
there are two dialectical opposites in my paper.
I understood. Yeah.
So
Don't
what we are supposed
Actually,
to
we
do is
want references. We want others also to give references in a very balanced way. Definitely, ma'am. Thank you very much. This paper is going to be published on Indic Today online magazine. Please take the opportunity to read all these references or in wherever ma'am had to actually jump or skip the slides. Those portions you can read in the published paper.